Since the beginning of World War I, when production of tanks began, the United States has continued to be a producer of tanks ever since that time. A great number of older tanks have been manufactured in white numbers and shipped to a wide variety of countries around the world. These tanks have been utilized in a variety of wars across the globe, and they have, without a doubt, demonstrated their viability on the battlefield. Consequently, they are still in service today. In this video, we will go over the top 4 American tanks that have been involved in the most battles over the course of American military history. Number 5. M47 Patton. The M47 Patton is ranked number 5 on the list of the top 8 American tanks that have engaged in the most combat throughout history. It was widely used by both NATO and Southeast Asian countries during the Cold War and was the only Patton series tank to remain combat-free while serving in American service. During the Suez Canal crisis in 1956, France used it against Egypt. In the 1965 and 1971 wars, Pakistan used it against India. In the 1967 Six-Day War, Jordan used it against Israel. It was employed by the Turkish army during their invasion of Cyprus in 1974, as well as in the wars of independence for Croatia, Somaliland, and Iran-Iraq. Number 4. M48 Patton. The M48 Patton is ranked number 4. The M48 Patton series saw substantial deployment with the United States and NATO. The U.S. military deployed nearly 600 of these tanks during the Vietnam War. The M4 Sherman tanks were utilized in both the 1965 Indo-Pak War and the subsequent war in 1971. During the 1967 Six-Day Battle, M48s were also employed to varying degrees of success. Iranian T-55, T-62, and T-72 tanks, as well as M60 Pattons, were used against them in the Iran-Iraq conflict from 1980 to 1988. The tanks were also deployed in the Western Sahara Desert against Polisario rebels. Number 3. M3 Stuart. The M3 Stuart, an American light tank, was first used in battle during the North African Campaign, and around 170 of them were employed by the British forces during Operation Crusader in 1941. It is the third American tank to have seen the most combat in history. When Stuart tanks were used in the Philippines in December 1941 to combat the Japanese in the closing phases of World War II, they became the first American man tanks to engage the enemy in tank-to-tank combat. The M3 was used for screening and reconnaissance operations outside of the Pacific War. It was also used in many other conflicts around the world, including the Chinese Civil War, the Indo-Pak War of 1947, the Korean War, the Cuban Revolution, and the Football War. Number 2. M4 Sherman. The M4 Sherman, ranked at number 2, initially engaged in combat at the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942 with the British 8th Army. The Sherman led numerous Western Allies' offensives following 1942. The Sherman, particularly the numerous upgraded and improved versions, saw combat action after World War II in a number of conflicts across the globe, including those involving the UN forces in the Korean War, Israel in the Arab-Israeli Wars, South Vietnam for a brief period in the Vietnam War, and both sides in the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965. It was the most produced tank in American history with 49,324 made. That's all for today. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.